All right, music fans, welcome. Harmless Dave here, talking real music in real time for real people just like you and just like me. If you've watched this channel for a while, you know that I'm from New England originally, um, born in Massachusetts, settled in a couple of different places. I was living on Cape Cod for a while and then moved to southern Worcester County for a while. And I began working or volunteering at a couple of radio stations. One was a Christian radio station. The other was a college radio station at Nichols College. And when I started working there, they had this just superb studio where I was like state of the art for college, and I was blown away. And on the wall, they had this plaque that was in honor of a DJ who had lost his life in the station nightclub fire. His name is Jimmy Gahan. And he and his friend had a radio show back in 2003 called The Power Hour. And they played all of this kind of music, and they were really excited about interviewing Jack Russell from Great White. Now, if you're from New England, especially that Rhode Island area and surrounding communities, the station nightclub fire was one of the worst tragedies in history in that area, where 100 people lost their lives due to fire codes, due to the fact that there weren't enough exits for people, due to shooting off pyrotechnics that, probably shouldn't have been used in that size area. You can pass the blame around here quite a bit. And from my standpoint, it was just such an ill-fated, horrible event that I don't know if people should continue to talk about it this far out. Now, Dee Snider, who I've had a lot of problems with lately because he's constantly lecturing people on what they need to do, in their own personal life with their health choices. And, I got lectured by a rock publication because I called a guy a moron for lecturing us parents about bringing our kids to Walgreens or CVS to do the thing. All right. And we're finding out that that particular thing isn't a good idea for kids. But Dee Snider just went crazy on this and really lost me. He really lost me as a human being. The sad and weird thing is he used to be a fairly reliable, decent guy. And he actually did this benefit concert back in 2008 for the victims of this horrific tragedy, or at least their families. A lot of people tend to grab onto charity events because it looks good on their resume. But when you really dig into what happened, this kid, Jimmy Gahan, no question that this was going to be one of the high points of his life, 21 years old at the time. And he doesn't get out of the station alive. I mean, between the smoke and the fire, and there is footage out there, and it's disturbing footage when they shoot off the pyrotechnics and the wall catches on fire, and that fire, man, oh man, did that spread like a son of a gun. And some people instinctively knew that, hey, this isn't part of the show, and they started to back up, and some people got the hell out of there. Now, I've always wondered, I think everybody in the band got out of there. And I'm not trying to say anything about that. But a guy like Jimmy Gahan, who wasn't in the band, but who was just as important as anyone else in that building, didn't get out. And 99 other people didn't get out. It was just one of those events. People told me that stuff just melted. So I'm in this studio probably 5 or 6 years after Jimmy Gahan's passing. And I didn't know Jimmy, but the director of the student union, I think her name was Brecker, something like that. She said to me that, Jimmy had this glow about him, and he was just, and even that day, she told me how much she missed him and how much he meant to the college. And it's a small town college, it's a private school, but it's a business oriented school. And everybody who goes there wants to become something important, or at least, make their mark on the world. And I think Jimmy was, he was in love with radio. People ask me, what did you take at college? And I say radio. The failed management major who just was the manager of the college radio station. So that's how I make it work. But point being here is, I don't know how much after the fact and Monday morning quarterbacking is appropriate. Dee Snider has a new song out. It's called Stand, or The Stand. I think it's just Stand. And it's dedicated to the lives that were lost almost 20 years later. And we should never forget what happened there, because we don't want this to ever happen again. We don't want rules broken in order to get a band in there. We don't want to keep bringing in people when the capacity of the place isn't, large enough to fit all these people inside. And that was another problem, is they oversold tickets to this event. Great White, for a number of years, quite honestly, when I heard that Great White was coming, or news story about Great White, I didn't even want to look at it, because I was still so angry about this. This news story in New England went on for weeks and weeks, and they would pull another body out, or somebody else who got out, who was still alive, ended up passing away at the hospital due to all the injuries and smoke inhalation and everything else. Just mind-blowing. That is not a good way to die. All right. That is one of the most horrific things I think I've ever thought about. So I'm not really sure, even though we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of this event, that people want to continue to relive it. If Dee Snider wants to fundraise, and he did so in the past, and he was a good guy about it, and he wants to give, money to charities, or to, the victims' loved ones and family and so forth, I get that, but I'm not sure at this point what good it will do. Did we change the fire code? I think we did. Did we change the capacity limits? I think we did. But this was one of the worst concert events in history, period. And it all could have been avoided quite easily. And another thing, just as a side note, heavy metal and hard rock music at that time had already kind of faded away. And these were fans who were going to see a band that was no longer in vogue. They weren't popular anymore, but they had this catalog that people wanted to go and hear, and from the late 80s and early 90s. And apparently, again, it just shows you that the music industry didn't really understand what it was doing for many years. And then this horrific fire happens, and it was almost like, see how bad this music is? It attracts all these people. They couldn't fit all these people inside the venue. And it's just this massive tragedy, and it tarnished the entire genre even more. And that was the last thing, hard rock and melodic metal and all that stuff. It's the last thing it needed. I always considered Great White as kind of a glam blues hard rock band. I never considered them like, they weren't hair metal, but they kind of fit into that category for a little while. More importantly, Jimmy Gahan lost his life, a kid who had his whole life ahead of him. I did a whole tribute on my show. It was called Lost and Found Rock Radio. I still have some of the little CD liners that I had for the show. And I remember doing the whole show and just dedicating it to Jimmy and mentioning the fire. And in that community, people are just like, okay, I don't want to hear about it anymore. I don't want to talk about it anymore, because I just don't think people can comprehend that 100 people basically died in this inferno. And you could hear screaming. People told me you could smell flesh burning. I mean, here's the deal. This can never happen again. Never. I mean, it's one of the worst things I've ever thought about, like I said. So in any event, Dee Snider, he's got a new song. It's called Stand. And I listened to it and I'm not all that confident that it really fits the occasion. And again, I think Dee was great on this particular thing. I think back again in 2008, he helped spearhead a fundraiser that was the 5-year anniversary. And I don't know anymore if we should even talk about the station nightclub fire. Next year, it'll be the 20th anniversary. I'm sure people will be talking about it. But I'm sure at this stage, everybody needs to move on. Who do I blame? I blame everybody. I do blame the band. I do blame the people who did the pyrotechnics. I obviously blame the nightclub at the time, which did a couple of things violating the fire code and the capacity limits and having this super flammable material on the wall. I would tilt, toward the club being more responsible than the band, but I don't know. Somebody should have used some common sense in there. And, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback. But everybody has a little bit of blame to go around, and maybe it's not fair to Great White and their reputation. Great White is a different band now. Mitch Malloy is their singer. Jack Russell, I think, smartly, in a way, is no longer part of Great White. He was the guy that Jimmy Gahan was trying to interview, or did interview. And all of this is just such a human tragedy, and it's really hard to put it all into words. But if you're from that area, I think you realize that this is just something that needs to be avoided, and it never needs to happen again. And that's the story. That is the true story. But nothing can bring these people back, including Jimmy Gahan, who loved what he was doing. And I felt a kindred spirit when I was working at that radio station, that I kind of knew he was there, and I never met the guy, but I just knew he was there. His spirit was there. I don't know that. I know that sounds weird, but anyway, that's my story on the station nightclub fire, one of the worst tragedies in rock music history.